Donald Trump threatens a 200% tariff on alcohol imports from the EU after Brussels put a 50% duty on US-made whiskey.
Russia has said it is entering the final stage of recapturing the Kursk region. This as US officials travel to Moscow for ceasefire talks.
As the United States moves closer to Russia, European powers are scrambling to reassess their defense strategy.
US President Donald Trump has threatened to impose a 200% tariff on wine, champagne and other alcoholic drinks imported from the EU. Trump said the threat would remain until Brussels removed a 50% duty on US-made whiskey. The charge on whiskey was in response to Trump's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. In a post on Truth Social, Trump blasted the EU as one of the most hostile and abusive taxing and tariffing authorities in the world. He also claimed the bloc was formed solely to take advantage of the United States. The tit-for-tat tariffs are a further escalation of a trade war which has rattled financial markets and raised concerns over the impact on consumers. And European alcohol firms saw their shares plummet in response to Trump's threat.
The specter of a transatlantic trade war looms again over the US and the EU. The EU replied with countermeasures to the United States' 25% tariff on imports of steel and aluminium. But the Commission's president stressed that tariffs are bad for business and worse for consumers.
When it comes to the reserves, natural reserves like steel and aluminium, will ultimately have an impact on the production machine at the European Union level. However, we cannot be certain if these tariffs, especially accompanied by additional policies from the EU institutions, this response of 26 billion in tariffs from the EU will create ultimately an inflationary impact for the EU citizens.
Recent research from the Kiel Institute has proven that the tariffs from the US to the European Union will, first and foremost, hurt the US in terms of inflation, employment and growth. But what about European citizens?
There are different channels on how tariffs could ultimately affect the citizens. Maybe citizens, when they see imported goods being more expensive, they will switch their consumption to domestic goods. However, we also have two very severe problems to think about, which is going to be the monetary reaction and the financial market reactions.
According to the analyst, the EU remains dependent on the US financial system, and a possible recession in the US could influence the European economy.
We are still uncertain on what is going to happen on US and consequently international growth, because now more and more analysts discuss about the prospects of a US recession. I will not exclude this scenario. Even Donald Trump, during his State of the Union speech recently, in front of Congress, he mentioned that things could get worse before they get better. And if we keep that in mind, that could translate into a recessionary impact worldwide.
The analyst says that although the EU has reacted more effectively to global crises before, it is still quite unprepared to deal with an extensive global recession.
The Russian military says it has taken back control of Syria, the largest town in the Kursk region controlled by Kiev. It released images of what they say are Russian troops recapturing a town in the area. The Kremlin spokesperson claimed on Wednesday that Moscow's operation to remove Ukrainian forces from Kursk had entered its final stage, while Ukraine's army commander-in-chief suggested his troops were pulling back to minimize losses. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said negotiators were on their way to Russia to present a 30-day ceasefire proposal backed by Kiev. This was confirmed by the Kremlin. Trump declined to give any further details, but said he'll do, quote, devastating things to Russia's economy if they don't accept the deal. Moscow has not publicly said whether it supports a ceasefire or not.
Defense ministers from 5 major military European powers, France, Germany, Italy, Poland and Britain, met on Wednesday in Paris to discuss a new security framework for Ukraine as a response to the rapprochement between the US and Russia. This meeting came a day after 34 military chiefs from NATO countries, as well as Japan and Australia, met in the French capital in rare and confidential talks without their US counterparts. French Defense Minister Sébastien Lecornu said during a press conference on Wednesday evening that at this stage, 15 countries are interested in continuing this process of developing this new security framework. France and Britain have been leading the charge to try to shore up as much support as possible for Ukraine since the US have started to pull back. Lecornu also announced that a new meeting will be held in 2 weeks with more defense ministers and without the US present in order to come up with more concrete proposals on security guarantees in Ukraine.
Defence spending is one of the most debated issues in Europe. Pressure has been growing on some EU members like Italy and Spain, which have yet to meet NATO's target spending. But what does public opinion in the country say? According to a recent poll, Italians appear to be deeply divided on the issue.
The poll suggests that Italians are both for and against increased defence spending in equal measure, with supporters of the five-star movement being mostly against it. The majority, 41% of Italians, are said to oppose deploying Italian soldiers to Ukraine unless it's part of a UN-led peace mission. But let's put the question straight to them.
Allora, sì, sono d'accordo con il piano Rearm Europe perché credo che l'Europa in questo particolare momento abbia bisogno di potersi difendere. Secondo il principio di deterrenza, cioè avere le armi servono a evitare di fare la guerra.
Assolutamente no, perché è inutile armarsi per delle guerre che non servono a nulla. Quindi completamente contrario. No, gli italiani è inutile che vanno lì, facciamo morti e nient'altro.
No, sono contro la guerra, contro le armi, contro tutte. Direi che i soldi possono essere spesi per altre cose.
Se c'è un pazzo che si vuole allargare, bisogna vedere fin dove si vuole allargare. Noi dobbiamo difenderci. Tutto qui.
Although largely endorsed by the Italian government, the Rearm Europe plan to strengthen the continent's defense capabilities has drawn mixed reactions from political parties.
I rischi per l'Italia sono innanzitutto quello dell'indebitamento eccessivo, essendo l'Italia un paese indebitato rispetto ad altri paesi che indebitati non sono. Il secondo, il dirottamento di alcune risorse dai fondi di coesione alla difesa, e il terzo, il contrasto da parte di diversi paesi, tra cui l'Austria, la Svezia, alla creazione di un vero e proprio debito europeo pubblico.
Giorgia Orlandi for Euronews in Rome.
The Congolese government is to meet with the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels for peace talks in Angola next week. Tensions escalated between the two after the militant group took control of the strategic Congo city of Goma in January. M23 is one of the around 100 armed groups that have been vying for a foothold in mineral-rich eastern Congo. The announcement comes after several cancelled peace talks hosted by mediator Angola that had previously excluded M23 rebels and instead focused on their Rwanda backers. The conflict between the two has created one of the world's most significant humanitarian crises, with more than 7 million people having been displaced. Images of Israeli jets striking what they say was a command center of the militant group Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Damascus. The UK-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said the building targeted was located in the northwest of the Syrian capital. and that one person was killed. Wherever terror activity against Israel is organized, Al-Jilani will find the Air Force aircraft flying above and striking terror targets. Israel's defense minister said, referring to the interim president of Syria, Ahmed al-Sarraj. Israel has carried out heavy airstrikes against Syrian military infrastructure since December.
At least 11 people were sent to the hospital with injuries after a 4.4 magnitude earthquake struck Naples. One woman was injured after part of a ceiling fell. Several buildings were damaged, including a church and a 7-story residential building. The tremors loosened stone and cement on facades, and fallen rubble fell on multiple vehicles. The earthquake struck at a depth of roughly 2 kilometers underneath the town of Pozzuoli. Many people were woken up by the tremors at night and fled to the streets or spent the night in their cars. The first tremor was followed by several minor ones with magnitudes recorded up to 1.2 on the Richter scale. Seismologists reported an increase in activity in the area recently. Last summer, authorities carried out drills in preparation for potential future emergencies.